Okay. It is 6 o'clock, and I will call the Newburgh School District Finance Committee working session to order. Um, go over the agenda. Well, yeah. First, well, actually, before we go to the agenda, just quick opening thoughts from my perspective. Michelle Morrison won't be here. She has a new job with PPS as their financial officer. And I don't know what her long-term ability to be here, but she just can't make it tonight because she's got commitments. Um, Gail is not on yet, so I had another thought directed to her. But and then um, we have the board packet stuff. I do not. Anybody watching online, I don't know if you all actually have this. I did not see it get posted. Got the information kind of late today. Transition to our secretaries for the school district. I just don't think it got converted over online. So this information will be available ASAP. Also, the two main reports we're going to go over. It's already been presented to the school board, so you could actually go back to last school board meeting packet and also see the same documents there. If anybody's on and live and wanting to follow closely tonight. So with that, review agenda. Any additions or deletions that we need to do or talk about? Okay, I will say silence is an answer. And then at that point, the minutes from last week or last meeting, which was November, give you a minute or two to review them. There's one thing to point out, but the minutes is clear. I think you'll be taking minutes today. Well, I had some handwritten notes, but then it's like I go back and watch it again and do official notes, so and fill in gaps. So however you want to do it. Yes. I'll call for any action on the minutes or motion, I guess.
I move to approve the minutes as is.
Second,
Second.
Mike.
I second.
Okay. Any discussion, anything to discuss or questions, concerns? Okay, then I will call for a vote. All in favor? Say aye. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 of us tonight. Who are we missing? Somebody else? Oh, Mark. Okay. So Michelle is not here, and Mark is not here. Oh, Mark is here, but yeah. Guys, I do see Galen on the line now. Thank you, Galen. We just got started. We just reviewed the minutes and approved them. Mark, if you want to review and approve them, we can revote. If not, we're good enough to go. Okay. Okay. Then I guess we'll just jump right into the first or the main two reports. I can't remember what we have the second quarter ADMW report is how was listed in the 2023-24 financial audit outcomes and annual finance report. Oh, finance committee. Okay. Now I remember what that is. So Gail, did you want to share that or is that Nate or?
I don't think I'm stepping on anyone's toes, but if you can hear me, okay?
A little bit. I think it's our side though. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, good. Excuse me. So I'll start with the enrollment report, and this is not the exact report that goes to the state, but this is the same the guts of it, basically, of what is going to the report. What I don't have here in front of you, this is what the board saw, but it doesn't necessarily break out like our ELL students, our SPED students. So some of the weightings aren't broken out here, but you have an idea of the ADMR, and really that's the biggest piece that's fluctuating at this point. So, from what it shows here is prior year data of we ended the year last year at the far right column on the summary page. It shows that we ended the year at
Oh,
3,997.
hold on, Galen. I think we're missing something. Is it the?
Yeah, we have just had a class size.
Is
You
that
just
what
have
you're?
the class size.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so evidently just the one tab. What I can do is I can share that, and hopefully you can see it if I can share it from my computer here. So let me go out and find it.
You can get this.
Nate says he can print it off too.
Oh,
Was it like a
perfect.
second tab of the
Yes.
Excel file?
Yes, it's another tab. So there's the detail tab, and then there's like a summary tab.
Do you have it that you can just send to me really quick email and I can go shoot
Sure
it,
can.
run it off? Thank you,
Sure.
Galen.
Absolutely. Let's go here because I think that's going to be the easiest place. Just a moment. Oops. Sorry, just taking a second. Sorry. And it's the tab that says school totals.
And Nate's already left, but I'm
Oh.
sure he'll look at the two
Yeah.
different tabs and determine which one we think Sierra have.
Okay, perfect. Okay. And luckily he can print.
Right? It's nice.
Well, I wasn't able to. I still can't print except for there is one printer I can print to, but Becky has to get it for me. So
Crazy.
yeah, it's kind of how it is sometimes. So if you want to, since you have the class sizes in front of you, we can kind of look at that if you'd like to, while we're waiting for Nate to bring the other pieces.
Sure.
I think the big thing to notice is that we have really, really reasonable class sizes in elementary. Elementary is doing really great. Our largest kindergarten is 26, and that's at Edwards, and that's because of Edwards has the dual immersion, and then they have the regular ed students or that aren't doing dual immersion. And so it's difficult sometimes. You'll wind up with usually one larger class and two usually a little more normal sized. But 26 would not force us to give another teacher for that. And so as you look through the grades, you can see that they're like I say, they're very reasonable. And, I mean, there is a third grade at 29 and one at 28, but still given not just the financial position we're in, but districts statewide, that would not look abnormal to another district.
Is the 33 in the fourth grade class, is that anything that we should be worried about at all?
That's at
Joanne Austin.
Joanne Austin. Yeah, it really isn't, and we wouldn't at this point of the year add someone, split that class up. If it were 34, 35, we would have thought about that earlier on. Or what we have done in some cases is push in an EA, or do pullouts, do more, like sort of the walk to reading kind of thing, where we're gonna take more students into smaller groups at different times of the day for the some of the more intense curriculum areas. So I know that they do that at times too, to deal with some of the larger class sizes. But it's just one of those, we have a bit of a bubble there, and it'll move on through again next year. And then we haven't seen another one of that size starting yet, because our kindergarten classes are not coming in very high. They're
Okay.
still coming in lower than they used to come in. So our bubble classes are actually moving through the system. And by next year, the biggest bubble classes will be in fifth grade, which we would see higher, we can deal with some higher levels at fifth grade anyway. What we don't show here is it's just got total class sizes or total class counts for that we have the
Hold on,
class.
Galen, you froze for a second. You were just
Oh.
introducing no breakouts for the upper grades, right? So
Right. So when we look at the 6th through 12th grade, we're not going to see any class sizes, but as we've broken those out, we do have some electives that are higher, a few other classes that we're going to have to look at for next year as we're doing the master schedules, because they basically had about a week and a half to do their master schedules this year. Excuse me, at least for the first trimester. And so, and that sort of sets the tone for the rest of the year. But they'll have more time this year to really be able to balance more of those classes. And I think that as we look to next year, we may have to add at the middle level, but I don't believe we're going to have to add anything at the high school, given that the high school numbers will be down a little bit. Middle school our enrollment for next year is looking to be fairly stable to what it was this year. So if we need to move some FTE possibly from the high school, we might be able to do that, as the high school is probably going to come in a little bit lower. But that's probably the only area that we're really going to have to look at some grade level adjustments. So that's the bulk of the grade level stuff. When you have the other sheet that Nate's given you, what that shows is on the left-hand side, you'll see the total, all the schools listed. What you will notice is COA is not listed as a school because it is a program. And the COA students are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns over. And they're all counted for elementary at Ewing Young. They're counted for the middle school level at CV. And at the high school level, they're counted at Catalyst. And Catalyst was a program before, but it is now its own school. But COA has taken that program. The program for COA is accounted for at the Catalyst level.
So, I was right. Go ahead. Go
What
ahead.
does that an acronym COA
I am
stand
so
for?
sorry. Our online academy,
Yeah, Shehalem Online
the Halem
Academy.
Online Academy.
Real quick, Galen. So it's just to clarify.
Mhm.
So if I look at the COA, and then of course you're saying that they're registered to certain schools.
Right.
So kids in seats, like in the actual building, say if we do Ewing Young, that means there's
Right.
only 104 kids at Ewing Young.
There's 137 in Ewing Young, kids in seats. Then you add.
Oh,
those
I see the ad.
73 for
Okay.
COA, and they come up with 171.
I should have scanned across. My
Yeah,
apologies.
and no, that's okay. It doesn't always make sense. Some of these other columns are students that we have that are accounted for at the high school level or at CV, that are excuse me, like the trans those are our transition students, basically our sales students. And then we have some other students that there's a specialized classroom. There's one at the high school, or at least there's enough that they're not, we identify them separately. And then we have you'll see some other columns to the right of COA that are shared time. We don't have any college co-enrolled. We do have three of our students are at Oasis, and Oasis is a full-time program offered through the ESD for severely impacted special ed students. And we pay either through our resolution dollars or a separate fee to the ESD for those students. They are clearly high cost disability students because just the portion that we pay to the ESD is about $68,000 a year for Oasis.
Is that per student, or is that
Per
for all
student.
three students?
Per student.
Per student. Okay.
Per student. Yeah. So then that next column says student count, not FTE. So that's our total student count for at January 1. So basically December 31 was 3,975. Our ADM is 3,965.5 because some of those students in those other categories don't count towards our ADM, or there's a portion of them that counts. And the FTE would be a 1.0 because we have one student, but they may only be there for 2 hours a day. So that's how we come to the 3,965.5 is what we would show at the state level as our ADM are our regular students, registered students. And that's the starting point for all of the calculations for, excuse me, for the state school fund.
Galen,
Yes.
can you tell me what we budgeted our ADMR as? So how close are we to budget compared? It's nice to see the compare.
No, when you say,
So I'm talking about, you've got the ADM here, you don't have the extra weighting, so just the ADM.
right,
What we've got here, you've got June, end of year last year, where we are to date this year. But what I'm wondering is, what did we base our state school fund budget
okay,
on?
that's what I was trying to make
Yeah.
sure that it was actually state school fund budget, not necessarily what we have sitting, what we allocated staffing on.
No, this is about revenue.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure we were,
Thank you.
yep. And let me just go pull that up. Oops. And remember that we are on extended ADMW.
So what was the extended ADMW that was used for,
So the extended ADMR would be that
sorry,
3,997
sorry.
is
go-
the 3,997.5. that's showing up in that 6/1/2024 column.
So that says June 1st, 24 ADM.
Correct.
So that would be the ADM.
That's our extended ADMR. Or
And yes, and so in our budget that we proposed and adopted
Mhm.
prior probably to having that information, was it also that number?
it was close. Just a moment.
The timing is very difficult in the spring. We have to budget before we know the number for the end of the year.
Yeah. Um, 3995.17.
Great, thank you.
So we're within two. No. What we actually anticipated our enrollment to be for the state school fund was less than that. It was 3896. And we are still at 3965. But I will tell you that we will lose at least 30 students between now and the end of the year. It may be more.
I want to make sure I understand. The 3896 number is what we use to budget the state school fund. No.
No, it's what we gave for estimate of membership and revenue.
Okay.
Okay.
And that was in what year? In January of 24 or January of 25?
24.
Thank you.
No, not 25.
Okay.
So, so I believe that we'll lose another 30, and that's about where I put our estimate of membership and revenue. We may, because I'm looking at what do I think our ADMR at 630 is going to be.
Mhm.
That may not be, we may be lower than that. And the reason being is that there's a couple of reasons, but and other districts are seeing the same kind of drop off. But I'm very interested to see basically what our March 1 enrollment will be, because we are seeing students not coming because of federal policy right now.
Mm.
There are families that are keeping their students at home. And it might not be enough to make a difference, but and what we haven't seen is what will be the impact of those seniors that leave after the end of second semester or second trimester. But we usually have about 20 or so at the high school level. So if we keep at this rate, I would expect that we'd have 20 and then another 10 or so throughout the rest of the student population, the other grades. But again, that's a guess at this point by looking at what we by looking at that December to June ratio. Over the last, I've got it for most schools for about 10 years, but COVID and before really don't count anymore. So if I look at what happens at just for the last 2 or 3 years, we could lose a little bit more than the 30, but I had to come up with my best estimate, and 30 was higher than what we lost last year, but lower than what we lost over the last 3 years. So again, we'll know a little bit more. But right now what we're looking for budget is basically 3935-ish as our ADMR. And then that's what I based our 11% of SPED students on, et cetera, as you go down the line. I have a number of what from Jillian of what she expects our total EL population to be, ELD population. But again, that might be rose colored at this point if people don't if people don't feel secure and don't send their kids to school. So I think everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens over the next few months with our enrollment, statewide. But I really think it's something we have to watch pretty closely right now. So are there any other questions about enrollment?
Are the weightings for ELL or English as a second language students?
Fairly similar. They're within a few students
Great.
of what we had before. So currently, for the 23-24, which was our extended 8MW, we had in 157.67. And we're looking at, and we had estimated 155. We're at like 153. So I think, like I say, we're really close there. I'm not worried about unless we start losing those students. We're very close to where we've come in. So but we don't know. We just don't know yet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Our IEP students are almost exactly identical. It's 657 for this year, for this fiscal year. And I was looking at 660 for next year based off the December census. So whether we'll have a change, I mean, we know there'll be somewhat of a change in our poverty, but I haven't gone out to look and see what that is yet, what the change at December is. But the state tells us how many above the 11% for ADMR or for special ed is. So I'm using last year's number is what I'm using. Hopefully that makes sense.
Are the
Okay, so-
online academy numbers similar to last year?
So the online academy numbers, what we did was we rolled everyone up as they each of the grades. And then I brought in a kindergarten similar to what we had this year, which was 6.
Okay.
Or sorry, 4. Sorry, I was thinking of 9th grade for Catalyst. But because we have a very large senior class actually at COA, and unless we get more students that enroll at those upper grades, COA will go down. Its overall enrollment will decrease. And that's part of the biggest issue that we have district-wide is that we're losing large 12th grade classes, and they're not made up by a large elementary or a large kindergarten class coming in.
I was just wondering whether there was a strategy for some of those parents who may be keeping their kids home from school, whether the online academy is being given to them as an option, which would help the district and help those students as well, not lose instruction as they move forward.
Right. I think the hardest part is helping families feel safe with that as an option as well.
Definitely a good thought. Any more questions for Galen for the numbers so far through December? Okay, sounds like we're good with that one.
On to the
again-
audit.
Yeah, onto the audit. So
The auditors gave a much better presentation than I'll be able to. I'm just going to kind of walk you through the pieces that we have, and the best news is we have a clean, unmodified opinion. So as our auditors looked at our financial statements as a whole and our internal controls overall, they feel that our financial statements are fairly represented as presented. If you have a copy of the letter that went to the board of directors, it talks about the purpose of the audit, which is sampling, inquiries, and analytical work. I love this, to opine on the fair presentation of the basic financial statements and compliance with generally accepted accounting principles, the Oregon municipal audit law, and related administrative rules, and federal, state, and other agency rules and regulations related to expenditures of federal awards. So that means that because of the amount of federal awards that we have, we're required to have a particular type of audit on those federal awards called an A-133 audit. So, so they looked at those pieces, and on page 2 of that, it says our audit opinion letter, an unmodified opinion on the basic financial statements, has been issued. This means we have given a clean opinion with no reservations. Number 2 was the state minimum standards. We found no exceptions or issues requiring comment, except as noted on page 58, which I will go through in a moment. And then federal awards, we found no issues of non-compliance and no question costs, except for one issue of non-compliance noted on page 66. And so they gave us an unmodified and unqualified opinion. On page 3 at the top, they say we encountered no difficulties in dealing with management in performing and completing our audit. And I will tell you, they were, and I will give a huge shout out to Andre Schellhaus for the work that she did with Nancy Petzman, who is our coordinator for fiscal services, in getting everything prepared in advance for the auditors so that they had everything they needed to work with upfront. And it really, I know it helped us get our audit done on time so that we could get it filed with the state, and not be concerned about having our state school fund withheld. And there are other districts right now that do not have their audits finished. Some aren't even started, and so they are not getting their state school fund. They didn't have any issues with our management representations. They were able to prepare all the required supplementary information, and then the last few pages of the letter to the board talks about new GASB statements that are coming out. So GASB 101 for compensated absences, and GASB 103, 102 for certain risk disclosures. So they're just keeping us informed as to future GASB statements that will apply to our financials as we go forward. And I am usually never one to recommend that being a early implementer of any of the GASB statements. I see Claire. Claire and I used to have lots of discussions about the GASB, and I think that in the last few years they have definitely come up with some statements that are truly not helpful to the general public in understanding financial statements as a whole.
I'm not the only one that is acknowledging your statements in this room.
Yeah. Okay. So then if you look at the financial statements and go to their page 7, page 7 of the packet talks other matters and best practices. And so they talk about our fidelity insurance coverage, and we can only get a certain amount. We can only get basically $1 million. And that's not enough to cover it, but there's no other to go out and get anything in excess of that would be cost prohibitive, just completely cost prohibitive. And so they put this basically in every single audit that they do, because the $1 million is not enough, but it's what we can get. They talked about governing body monitoring. Making sure that the activities that our employees do are the correct ones for them, and to the extent that we can, item 4, it talks about segregation of duties. To the extent that we can segregate duties, we have to do that, but we have a very small staff, and they understand that there are only certain things that can be segregated. And because we have to have people to back up other people, there may be instance where someone might have the ability to do certain steps that in a perfect system they wouldn't be able to do, but to be able to back someone else to it, because we're so small. But we have other internal controls that compensate for that, for those segregations of duties. The other two things that they talked about were stale dated checks, which is something that we have been working on. In every November, we are to turn in checks to the state that go to for anyone that hasn't cashed those checks. We have an obligation to look for those, try to get them to cash the check for basically 3 years, to contact them, to either issue another check if they've lost it, to, follow up with that. And if after 3 years, we're still unable to get that check cashed by the appropriate vendor, employee, et cetera, then we turn that over to the state, and it goes to their basically a pot of money, that unclaimed property, and the state holds that. And anyone, I would advise everyone to go out once a year and put your name in to see if you've got any unclaimed property out there. I was totally surprised one year that I had something from Blue Cross that I thought, well, why didn't they just send it to me? But they didn't. And I never got anything from them that I know of. But I got $353 back from Blue Cross. But it's the same for what we do. And they noticed that we had a couple of stale dated checks that should have gone. We were still in the process of doing that in November. And so we're working to make sure that by next November, everything will have happened before the November deadline, because hopefully our audit will be in September. But it's one of those things. Sometimes they catch you just before or just after having filed with the state. And for us, they basically caught it before we filed with the state. So, and then the other had to do with some 403B compliance requirements. And the key is the possibility exists that errors or irregularities could exist with our third party services for educational and clerical substitute services, but nothing came to their attention during testing. And they recommend that the governing body review the risks regarding this matter and consider getting assurance from the service provider that will reduce any risks, including being named on their insurance policies. So that is something that we can work on in our contract for the next year. So those are the first pieces. Then when you go to page 58 at the bottom of the audit, look for their page 58. It talks a little bit about some of these other it talks about compliance, and it says we performed procedures to the extent we considered necessary to address the required comments and disclosures, which included but were not limited to the following. And so they list those in bullet points. And then in connection with their testing, it came to their attention that expenditures of the various funds were within authorized appropriations, except as noted on page 14 of the report. So we had one of our appropriation levels in the general fund was in excess. What we spent was in excess of our appropriation level. So they noted that. It is basically a note to the state that we were out of appropriations. But that's one of the reasons I'm trying to keep you informed every month as to where we are currently in our appropriations and where I think we will end the year, so that we can get a supplemental budget filed and a transfer between appropriation levels, an appropriation level transfer before the end of the year, so that we will be in compliance. And I will say, I thought we did a pretty stellar job with Jackie's help of coming as close as we did, given what was happening at the end of the year last year, and the movement that we had also between general fund and other funds of expenditures at the end of the year. So to be slightly out of compliance I believe it was the 2,000 functions in general fund, is, for everything that we went through last year, I think is pretty stellar. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I was watching as I was doing the minutes for this meeting, or for last meeting, to be ready for this meeting. This is actually, we actually had a 2 or 3 minute discussion about this. Claire talked about this line item specifically. And so did you, Galen. But I mean, I remember the comments and replaying in my head. So it's good that we caught it before they, well, not caught it. We knew of it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Well, I just want to say that given where we started this meeting last summer or early
Yes.
September or wherever, you and your staff done an amazing job to get a clean audit and to only be out of compliance with these very doable things to keep getting into compliance. So kudos to you for what you're doing and what we'll continue to do as we go forward.
Thank you. I will say it was a group effort. It was very much that. So
Galen,
yeah.
would you please pass on to the business office staff and anyone else involved with the audit on how much we appreciate the work that they did and how pleased we are with the end results, that it really took moving mountains to get there, and we recognize that hard work and applaud their efforts.
Thank you. And I will absolutely. And Nate can forward that on as well. I will say, we got to the point where Nancy would say, "Oh, Andre left me another love note today." We didn't call them, things that we had to have happen. They were love notes. So sometimes you just have to find a way to deal with things. The final piece that I will talk on page 66 of the audit. And so 66 and then basically 67 of the audit talks about the summary of auditors' results. This is schedules of findings and question costs. This is part of the A133 audit that I discussed for grants, federal awards. So part of what they have to do is they have to look at your audit as a whole, and then specifically at the grant awards. So if you notice that it's an unmodified opinion, which is exactly what it was, but it says were material weaknesses identified, and it is checked yes. So the two material weaknesses that were checked are on that next page. So they're financial statement findings. So FS 2024-1 and then FS 2024-2. And these talk about two things that I want, first of all, to, and the auditors were very clear about this, and I was very appreciative, is that both of these items we discovered in our work reconciling both the debt service and the bond fund, and realized that these are issues that actually go back to the 22-23 audit that were not caught by either us as a district or by the auditors until we were reconciling all of these pieces as a finance office. So the first one says, during our review of the district's capital asset register, it was brought to our attention that the district failed to adequately reconcile their capital asset register used in the fiscal year June 30, 2023 audit, resulting in a material misstatement of capital expenditures. So this was basically twofold. One was at no point were the construction in progress account in the bond, was it reconciled to actual what we put into construction in progress in the financial statements in our capital asset register. Excuse me, our capital asset footnote. The second piece is that the former director of finance, and I'm not really sure why, but chose to write off of our books fully depreciated assets that we still owned. Even if they're fully depreciated, and so we're not depreciating anything, and their net book value would be zero, you still need to keep them on your register if you own them. We still owned these assets, and we didn't sell them. We didn't have a fire or a flood or anything that would have destroyed them, that we would have written them off. And I checked with our bond group that it wasn't like we had gotten rid of some of these assets to rebuild or change something up. So we had to put those assets back onto our books, and that required a prior period adjustment. So now with GASB 100, that requires a finding. And so even though it's not it literally had, that particular piece had zero material impact, but it hits our it hit the totals that we show on our as total capital assets that we own. So so we brought that to them, explained what we needed to do, and they agreed with our finding needed to do to make it correct, and we did that. And I like that they said, that we'll have additional control practices to ensure the capital asset register is adequately maintained. It is adequately maintained. It had not been reconciled, and it will now on a go-forward basis be reconciled every year. The second one was a little bit more complicated. We had a debt service payment that in 22-23, and it was paid. So we had no problem with being in arrears on a debt service, but it was not paid from the correct account. It was paid for out of our bond account and not out of the debt service account. So this hit two different funds, the bond fund, which is a 400 fund, and the debt service fund, which is a 300 fund. And because of that, and it being a material amount in that it was just shy of $2 million and covering two funds, and in a prior year, it's a prior period adjustment. And because of GASB 100, it's considered a material weakness. But we came forward and explained what needed to happen, what we proposed, the journal entry that needed to happen, and the auditors, agreed completely with us, and we did what was expected. And now the key also was that debt service fund was not being reconciled at year end. And we know the bond fund wasn't, because the capital assets and the construction in progress was not being properly reconciled at year end as well. So all of those pieces have been accounted for in our procedures. So now they will happen on a go forward basis, but that's what they were talking about here. It made no, truly, there was no material change to our statements. It was just because it was between funds, and then because everything basically that for the construction in progress that wasn't reconciled in a prior year, almost all of that was fully capitalized this year in 23-24. Most of it had to do with Dundee Elementary School and that was completed and at the end of this of 23-24 and occupied at the beginning of 24-25. So that's those are the findings. That's what we did with the audit. And do you have any other questions? I know this is really dry, but
Yeah, no, Galen, I think somebody else does have some questions for you, but just a real quick question, hopefully. So these two findings at the very end, the FS 2024-1 and -2, it sounds like the two one. I mean, do any of these impact the general fund issues that we were trying to uncover what was happening
No.
from last May?
no,
Okay.
no, they really didn't. And they all happened in 22-23.
Okay.
So before everything sort of went haywire in the 23-24 school year. So, and they did not touch general fund, at
Okay.
all. And these are the pieces that we did have to send a copy of the findings, and that the board had been informed of those, and the board chair signed the letter that we
Right,
sent to the
right.
Secretary of State. So this has already been reported to the Secretary of State as well.
And there's no chance. I mean, of course, it didn't touch general fund, but the fact that it was 22-23 would have been like a snowball effect at all, even with like the bond budget to the 23-24. I mean, because
Actually, what that did was it brought cash back into the bond fund.
got you. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, thank you.
So I don't really have a question, but I was watching the board presentation for the budget, and board member Woodward, she had a question about why the board couldn't see what was going on in the
Right.
district. And you did a really great job of explaining the revenue part of it. But when I looked at it, I went back and looked at the board presentations that had been done by the prior administration. And I noticed something in the way that expenditures were being presented to the board. And I just wanted to bring that really to the board's attention. So reports were being run by function for the board. And, you know, when you look at things, where are your biggest expenditures? They're in salaries, they're in benefits, they're in contracted services. But if you look at function, you're looking at everything at once that was expended in a function like instruction. It's all mushed together and you can't see it. And so, Galen, you're reporting it now by object. And I just want into the board to put in their mind that you need to look at things by object. Because if there's a discrepancy in salaries, it's going to pop up.
Yep.
You know, it's not going to pop up by function. By function, you're not going to see the finer detail. So, and because those three areas especially are where you can really have some big swings, I just wanted to point that out, that a report run by function is not really a clear and transparent way to present information to a board.
I agree with you that objects are necessary to really have a good analysis of how you're doing on your spending. And I also believe having the function is important to know that you're within your appropriation level.
Sure.
So having Nate as advice from this committee or recommendation, I don't know that we've voted on it, but just a discussion that there's a reason for having both. Yeah.
And I will say that the reports that I give now start with revenue, go to expenditures basically by object, then go to appropriation levels,
Right.
and then a reconciliation of state school fund. And so that's why I think that gives a lot more detail, but it lets you see the whole picture.
Right.
And I think the other piece that was missing before with the expenditures was that not only were they just going by function, but it was said, oh, look, they're within budget, they're just fine. But budget was completely inaccurate because it was not based on what revenue we were actually getting. And so
Correct.
I think that's, you know, I really tried to walk the board through that. And I think that you all understand sort of that, just because you're in the finance world, right? And budget is just an estimate of where we think we're going to be. And so we need to be looking, are we tracking by prior year? Are we tracking, by what we think, just knowing the system well enough? The other thing I will say is that there has not been a good practice of encumbering, other than salaries and benefits. And so we've worked really hard this year to get our larger contracts encumbered completely so that we know that I can say, look, it's already encumbered. The likelihood that we're going to spend it is really good, right? Because they did not encumber our transportation contract when they didn't budget for it correctly, and then they didn't encumber for it. And so, and it's a $5.1 million contract. One contract is basically almost 10% of the budget. So you really have to look at how you're encumbering those pieces.
Can you give us an example so maybe me and Saul can kind of bring it back to the board of like what's what is your process or maybe Nate's process going forward of how you track the encumbrances? And like you said, there was a gap and they weren't doing that. You're working really hard now. So what is your process, or what should we be calling out, or we should be aware of as a recipient of this information to understand what you're doing and how it impacts why we need to know?
Right. So what I've been doing is all the larger contracts. So things like our transportation contract, we've basically encumbered it at the max of what we could spend on the contract. And then if we come down to the end of the year and we're not going to spend all of that, we can disencumber it. And we have that then as a balance. Hallelujah. Right. The other piece that we're looking at, we know that we're spending a lot, probably more, actually not probably, more than what we have budgeted for utilities. So gas, electric, water, sewer, garbage, those pieces. But I've had those encumbered up to at least up to the budget. And then when I do my projections, I know that we will probably spend more. So I'm adding a piece in that projection piece, not in the encumbrances, but in the projection piece, so that I know that we're going to, I've got a sort of not a fail safe, but a cushion there, right? That's pulling it out so that we don't think we have it to spend. The other piece that has been a big difference this year is they weren't encumbered, and we're still working with special ed on this one, so it's not perfect, but we are working on it. That when they would have a professional services contract, let's say with a psychologist, and the maximum amount of the contract is, let's say, $68,000 for the year. They would put in, they don't encumber any of it. They would just, every time they got an invoice, they'd put an invoice in as a PO, and that's the total amount. It would be encumbered until it was paid, but then nothing else going forward. We know we're expecting to pay $68,000 for this psych over the year. If let's say in March, their services go away and we hire someone, and maybe it's, or we don't need them anymore, and we can end the contract at that point, then we would disencumber the rest of that. And we would still be able to spend it, right? But we know we're right up front, we know we're going to spend 68,000 on this. We're planning on that. That should go in as an encumbrance. And there's been a lot of concern over the concept of the difference between what is an open PO and a blanket PO. And so I want to be sure that we're doing this the right way and encumbering for what we're actually expecting to happen. And if part of I will say what's happened in the bond fund is they haven't been very good at disencumbering at the end of certain projects. So we still have some they're very good at encumbering in the bond fund. But elsewhere they're not as good. And so we still have some encumbrances in the bond fund that need to go away, be cleaned out and disencumbered. They'll roll over a full contract for the next year, even though we may have spent, let's say the contract was for $1 million. We've spent 500,000 out of this year. It rolls as a full $1 million. We pay the extra 500, and then we've got a $500,000 encumbrance sitting out there. We know we're not going to pay because we paid it 2 years ago. So we have some cleanup in bond fund that I will say is going to need to happen, but I'd rather almost some of that in general fund than the way it has been done in the past.
Well, I appreciate you just giving us a few examples of what we found and how you're tackling them. So very enlightening, at least from my perspective. So thank you.
Sure.
Was there any other questions regarding the audits for Gay Allen or Nate? I know Nate wasn't involved, but he's here, so throw a question his way. Well, with that, let's actually go jump to number 4, and then we'll come back to number 3 in a second. So I know Nate did introduce everybody or himself to everybody as they came in. And he was somewhat introduced on our last board meeting, but I just want to say thank you, or welcome, Nate. Thank you for joining us tonight, because I know it's officially your first week, even though Dave may have tapped you on your shoulder for a few things before, but I appreciate that. I just kind of want to know, and this is just an open discussion, there's no forms or anything regarding this, or reports, is just like, what are we looking at for the rest of the year between Gay Allen and Nate? And I don't care who answers it, just wondering like what's happening, and when can we throw a party for Gay Allen, et cetera. So
I think you should throw a party for Gail and every time she comes.
yeah,
That would be good. But the plan moving forward, if you're okay with me answering, Galen, is that I got to get in the nitty-gritty details, and then I think Gail and I will touch base probably weekly, virtually, and then once in a while in person to go through things. I mean, she's a great tool, so I'm going to use her as much as I can within reason. And so she's a wealth of knowledge. I tell you that right now. She's been very helpful just in the 3 days I've been here and the 3 days I wasn't here. So she's been good. So that's kind of the plan going forward. And yeah. With her.
Are there any other just general questions, or we have Nate here.
Did you want to add anything, Galen?
I just wanted to add one thing on that, is that we all agree that we need to make sure that we have more than one set of eyes on things right now. And so that's going to kind of be my role as that other set of eyes. And I've done a little bit of prep work on the budget so that Nate can just move into it, right? So that's still kind of where my focus will be, is more on making sure that as we budget for this next year, that we're really have more than, like I say, more than one set of eyes on everything.
Well, sounds good. And just, I don't think this is asking too much, but are you, Galen, going to be on board with NSD for the remainder of the year up to a certain contract allotment that we've approved, or?
That's currently, I'll be able to be, as long as Nate needs, or we feel that we, need some extra eyes on things, that's basically what it would be. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, open item. Anybody want questions? Thanks, whatever.
I just welcome welcome back to Newburgh, actually. So I think as you start to get your footing here in the district, I think what would be helpful is how we as a finance advisory committee could help, especially as it relates to being a voice to the community as unelected board members or of this specific board, and start to think about that. If one of our key roles or items is to provide some insight. How can we help you do that, especially given what's happened in the community over the last couple of years? How can we help you in doing that for the community? So as you start to kind of turning your wheels, that'd be great to hear what you have to think about that.
Thank you, Derek. Well said. Great time to transition into the finance committee report that we were going to, we kind of agreed on a few of us to start working on something over that couple month break. I know I did talk to Claire earlier this week when we were talking about finalizing the agenda. Do you want to give an update on that, Claire, or?
Well, one of the things, so we have not done any work on it. One of the things that was happening over the last couple of months is the board was having a conversation with the community, and the superintendent was having a conversation with the community, and I know the board has been involved in that process as well. So one of the things that as we now have, a longer term superintendent, and we now have a permanent finance director, and there's been a transition, a full transition of leadership. Is this something the community is still hoping to hear more about? Do they still need answers, or are they moving forward on a focus of new leadership? And should we be focusing on supporting that new leadership and what we can do to support them, rather than going back into what went wrong under the former leadership? So that's the question that I bring to the table today: is where is our community now? What are they hoping to hear? From what would be helpful to them from this committee, and what was helpful to the board. We are an advisory committee at the board's request. What would be helpful to the new superintendent? What would be helpful to the new finance director? We want to be of service to our community and of our leaders of the district. So I don't know that I have that answer, but I'm really wanting to hear more maybe from our board representatives about what you're hearing from the community at this point and what would be helpful. And if we need to do a check-in with our superintendent, and then just be sure that it's going to be helpful work rather than going backwards. I'm kind of in the mode of moving forward, but I also want to hear what the community needs.
Okay, so I didn't really think that the focus was on going backwards as much as it was to explain why the finance committee felt that a forensic audit wasn't needed. And then in that respect, I think the focus would be on what changes have been implemented as far as controls that render the need for a forensic audit to be unnecessary. So rather than focusing backwards, it's focusing more on the accuracy of the reporting that's happening now, what has changed that's made it more accurate, those kinds of things, rather than pointing fingers backwards about what wasn't done. So that's what I was thinking, I think, when I recommended that we do a letter. But and I still think that, the community may be confused about why first it was forensic audit and then it's no forensic audit, and what has changed. I mean, even though there's talk going on, has it been so much on that aspect? So that's.
It's probably not a good idea to just all of a sudden drop it without making a statement saying, yeah, we just kind of ignored it for long enough and now it's gone away.
Right. Right. Because it hasn't been ignored, it's been fixed. So let's communicate what's been done to make it so that a forensic audit isn't needed. And the audit backs up the fact that there's not a need because it says that there was no malfeasance. No funds were disappeared. And that's mainly what I've heard from the community. They're thinking that somebody made off with funds, so yeah. So anyway.
Well, I'm
that's
not
it.
sure that your average person in the community even was aware that anybody talked about a forensic audit, except for those who may have clued into a board meeting. And it seems to me that what we need to be able to tell the community is that we can celebrate that we have a clean audit, that our prediction going forward looks like we are, and this is what I'd like to see some more information about, because I thought we were going to have it at this meeting about how our tax monies were coming in and what our prediction would be for the end of the year balance as a result of our, of our ADM and our resources that we have. But it seems to me that we should concentrate on that with the permanent superintendent and a finance person, we can celebrate the work that has been done with a clean audit and going forward. And we can explain, I suppose, why the board didn't do a forensic audit, but there shouldn't be very much details. It should never be in a way in which it should make people feel fearful about what had happened.
From my perspective, I would say that my thought has always been this idea of trying to help explain why we didn't do the forensic audit that we had talked about fairly openly in the board meetings. And I do agree that there are a lot of people that didn't know that that was even a conversation. But I do think that there are a lot of people in the community that knew, all right, well, we're down how many millions of dollars? What happened? We'll probably never find out. And I feel like we can come to the community, and whether it's posted on our webpage if somebody wants to find it, that it's not a simple explanation, but it can be tracked. We can show you that this came in from the state school fund, issues that we had with the number of students that we had enrolled, with the transportation, with our lack of possession control management. I think that we can succinctly explain that in a not looking backwards, not trying to say that somebody was at fault here, but there were controls not in place, and now we are working diligently to make sure that those controls are in place, that we can go forward and we could give answers to anything that might seem out of line, because we have eyes on it. We have people who are making sure that those eyes are on it. That's how I see it. I think that when we made this suggestion to the board to not do the finance or the forensic audit, part of that was we did plan with our committee to provide that kind of statement for not just the board, but for the community, to try to heal those wounds and put people's worst fears to rest, that it is some malfeasance that maybe now we're hiding. I think that we can explain it very succinctly with all the information that we have now.
Any other thoughts?
Just real quick, I just think the letter closes the issue from the finance committee, the non-board members' point of view. And so it just kind of puts it to rest, puts it behind us. It doesn't, and again, it doesn't have to be, a big old report, just a little bit. So, I mean, again, we've had the one audit and other things. So I think it just puts it to rest.
I think that that is a really important piece of all of that. And I think that it gives not a reason for us to be meeting, but I think that it shows that we We're trying to be forward public facing with what we're doing here to provide those kind of answers that I think we were tasked with in the first place, and to show that this is continuing to make sure that those kind of things don't continue to pile up in future years.
Yeah, I would agree with everybody's statement. I think, I mean, the biggest thing that I've come to light probably this year of being on the board in general is it's about the closure pieces. I've brought up things even to the board like, hey, we need to close the loop on this. You know, and there may have been a decision, right? And maybe we didn't have to do a board decision, but we said we were going to look at something, and then we didn't need to. We still need to bring it up publicly and talk about. So I think I agree with everybody. My next question is then do we have what we need to kind of put that statement together? Do we need to brainstorm ideas? Is there other data points we think we need, but we don't have? I don't know. Let's take a few moments, to maybe think about this. I don't know, Claire, I know when we talked, you said that Galen did provide some stuff more recently that may help with that, but it's like, do you think you have what you need? Or again, is there something else that we can do, or Galen or whoever can help maybe provide? So.
Well, I think the framing tonight is a little bit different than what we had before, which is fine. It's better. I think it's a better framing. And so, and plus some of the conversations we've been having with Galen today, actually every time we meet with Galen, we hear about the improvements and the changes that have been made. So, what I can do is create some headings. I want to confirm the folks that have agreed to work on this before are still okay to do so. Okay.
Yeah, I think what would be really helpful, and I think we can really specific to previous issues that really drew a lot of the criticality of this committee would be just drawing attention to what those, we could probably boil it down to 3 to 5 items that were large reasons why, to explain what happened, and then explain how we're moving forward to address those, whether it be through, like, if we talk about the sped spending, a lot of money going to third-party contractors, how we put internal controls in place to talk through that. With transportation, we're now using encumbrances to track against. So really dialing those specific items in, and then talk about how we're moving forward to ensure that these challenges don't pop up in our community again, I think would be really helpful. To number one, just point out that, again, we're not just glossing over this as some sort of, to try to keep the community's head in the sand, or, something nefarious was happening, obviously, through the audit, and the fact that there were the changes, or the reportings were non-material in nature, kind of speaks to the fact that didn't happen. But I think if we can specifically call out those items, what the impacts were, and how we're addressing those moving forward, I think would be really good to kind of putting that to close and then moving forward.
I guess I just want a clarification on one point. When we're saying it's not what we're doing. So, because we're the finance committee, so we actually aren't doing any of that.
I think we collectively as NSD, how we're improving the situation.
Yeah, it's the royal we. So, like, what the staff is doing to address that. That's right. I'm not doing anything.
I just wanted clarification.
No, I agree. And I think when Galen was talking about all these encumbrance practices, and that's why I kind of asked, give us some examples, because I think all those could be perfect examples in this type of report, or, executive summary, whatever we want to call it. We've named it a few things over the last couple of meetings. So yeah, is there any other ideas or thoughts that we want how to help shape this? Basically want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to say what they want to say or give ideas. Okay, then is the action, I know we haven't talked about our next meeting yet, but is then the action that maybe those 3 or 4 folks like at least communicate maybe through email or whatever, and like maybe do a
So,
mini work session somewhere.
so I have Mark, Claire, and Derek, and you said 4. So
Jared was going to be the editor auditor role, so that's what that's what he said in
Sorry.
the.
I have forgotten. Editor.
Do we want to define as a group what those items that we want to address are, just so that we're on the same page, as to what the critical critical impacts were, as it related to the 23-24 budget, and how we want to talk through those? Just as a high level, obviously, those who are responsible for drafting the document would be putting the real meat on the bones, so to speak. But like transportation, I think it was one of the larger ones, spending, the 22-23 enrollment changes, variance that was a clawback, I think was another one. The local revenues, I think was another one. And then I don't, it's been a while since we've convened, but those are the 4 that come to mind. I don't know if there's anything else we want
Yeah,
to speak through.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd want to hierarchy these ideas. Obviously, at least with the projections and like what was budgeted versus actuals and tracking those, like almost like the state school funding like level, and you can maybe break those down to some subsections. The contracts then could be like, okay, well, that could be another large header with the couple examples of the bus, and then the services, the special the sped third party services contractors, in like I'm always outline format in my head and how I do it on paper. So that's how I see at least those couple. I guess controls would be another large heading.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just this, even right now, the struggle to be like, well, what were the pieces is what I guess I hope from this is that there's a succinct piece of, a place that you could look to say, all right, that's right. So the issues with the state school fund and what we had projected was revenue coming in, that ended up impacting approximately this much. And then the position control systems allowed for overspending in these spaces by approximately this much. And I think once you get to that point, from our last meeting, which was a few months ago, I'm remembering that it felt very much, oh, you can almost to the dollar show what happened here. And I just think that is helpful, rather than I go out sometimes and somebody's like, so what did happen? And it's like, oh man, I need to go back and just watch that meeting so that I have the right numbers from the right things, because it's confusing, especially for some of us not school finance savvy individuals.
So, yeah, I mean, numbers are difficult. And so I don't even know if the numbers per se are as important as what the controls were that were lacking. So, I don't know that the community is concerned about, oh, we overspent this by this much and we didn't, we did this estimate wrong and it resulted in an error of this much. I don't think the dollars are as important as what the problem was that resulted in those numbers being wrong, and how do you fix that problem. So I'm thinking more like, what was the problem, what was done to fix it, and don't fixate on the numbers.
I think one important thing would be is what has been put in place to prevent it from happening again.
Yeah.
I guess to me, and this is kind of, I guess, maybe coming from the corporate world, is like we're doing a root cause analysis, and then how do we stop it from happening going forward, right? I'm drawing a blank on the word, but mitigation, strategy. And I think that's kind of maybe, I think I might meet what you're asking for, Saul, and a little bit, it might not be down the numbers, but it could be, thinking from that perspective, it could be like, this is what we found. And then this is to Gay's perspective, like, well, this is how we move forward and the controls we put in place, to avoid it. Does that help? there, Derek? You're the one that kind of asked that question and opened that can of worms.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a slightly differing opinion as to whether the numbers matter, and it specifically goes to Saul gets the question like what's the actual dollar amount? I don't think that most community members would be like, well, that's 2% of budget, but considering when that all kind of dropped, there was a lot of numbers that got thrown out of that period. Most of them were probably not correct or within context, but I think at the very least, just having some level of abbreviate, like obviously we're not going to say it was 2.3765 million. Like that doesn't really help, but to put at least a high level dollar amount, I think would be helpful. Again, that it will at least provide the expectation of transparency to the community. Now, what people do with that, we obviously can't control that per se, but I think at least having some sort of monetary impact, I think, is important for some members of the community. So.
Any other thoughts?
There are a lot of thoughts, and we probably won't be able to fit all of them into the same communication, but we will certainly do our best.
Okay. Now I guess the tactical part, do you 3 or 4 need to meet, or are you going to try to do this through like email? I think it's fine. Again, it sounds like everybody has a Newburgh School District email now, right? And you've been able to access it. Okay, so let's make sure we use that.
So I will start a document that we can share
Okay.
and work with the 3 other individuals of creating, some organization to it. And what is the time frame that you'd like this completed by?
Well, I think it's I guess that kind of ties in the next subject to what's the future meetings. And I know we're kind of coming up to budget season in a couple months, but like I think we should come back together and review it, understand it, able to process it as a larger group, and maybe feedback, find tweaks here or there, whatever, before then maybe me and Saul present it to the board and Dave. So I guess just to tie into maybe when the next meeting may be, and then maybe see if that's a goal. So.
Okay, so we'll create something, bring back a draft to the finance committee, and then we'll meet as a finance committee to review and make suggestions for improvement, and then we'll finalize.
I think that tactic works unless you.
Yeah, no, my thought, like high level, it would be nice, I feel like, to have that done before we are finalizing next year's budget as tying up the loose ends of the year that was. So not necessarily by March, 3rd, but before the end of the school year, I think would be ideal to have.
I don't have dates for the budget committee meetings. Is there a budget calendar for next year?
I left it on the board meetings, and those are left at home. You have those, Nate, or no? Galen, do you have those off the top of your head by chance?
So February 25th is the work session. April, hold on, I can pull this up.
I think February was more of a training to me.
Right, it's a work session. It's not an actual budget committee meeting,
Right.
but
for any new members, get up to speed on what the budget committee does and
Correct.
terminology, et cetera.
Just a moment. I had it up just a little bit ago.
You want to do your mic?
And the first
Oh.
budget committee meeting is on the 15th
15th of
April,
April. Okay.
and then the second is on the 6th of May, and then we'll have the budget hearing on June 10th. So pretty late schedule.
And that's the same. Okay. So the first 2 are opposite Tuesdays of board meetings. And then the last one is the precursor to a board meeting. I guess I'll just throw this out here. Let's schedule our maybe one more meeting next month and have a draft version of that to be presented and talked about within this group. And then we can potentially have it ready to share by the April board meeting or budget meeting. Okay. So with that, if we kind of go off our last few meetings, would be March 5th, well, yes, yeah, because February's 28 days. Would March 5th be the appropriate day? Would be a Wednesday? Again, right,
So there is a high school Newburgh Nation event on that day that I'll be in attendance of, so I won't be able to make it on that 5th. It's for middle schoolers going into high school.
oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you're working on this, it'd be nice.
Potentially, yeah.
Yes. Well, what are the alternate dates
So, like-
here? So March 11th is the first meeting of the month for the board. And we have two, well, actually that month we won't have two because there's spring break, unless it's back to back. And I don't have, again, I left that at home.
Yeah, we do have one on the 18th.
Okay, so it is back to back, okay. This is the old-
Is March 6th a possibility?
That
Not
would
for
work.
me.
Hey, I've spent my birthday here already, so.
Is March 4th a possibility?
For me, it's a good day.
Okay,
I won't be here. I'll be at a conference, but
are you at conference all week that week?
I come back Wednesday.
Okay,
So
Are we trying to do
we
this
could
before
meet
the
on
board meeting?
So here's a potential. We could meet on the 5th. We can talk about, I'm guessing we'll probably talk about, so we should have the data from the state for enrollment. I think that comes out in February. I don't know if that was a topic we were going to talk about as it relates to ADMW and ADMR as it relates to percentage of total, but there's probably some topics that we might be able to discuss in that first hour. And then I can attend after 7 o'clock because the event goes from 6 to 7, it looks like.
okay.
So
So what if we just start our meeting at 7 o'clock that night?
We could do that as well.
Yeah.
And just do a shorter meeting. I do believe though, I think too, back to Mark's statement earlier, and I think now after listening to you a little bit more, I think there was some, we wanted to, I mean, I know we have numbers, we have like student numbers, but do we need to look at, as you were saying, Galen, we need to continue making adjustments? And now that we should have most of the county funds in, like, do we need to make an adjustment to our state fund request or
So
forecast?
I made an adjustment. They haven't done a rebalancing yet, so I don't know how all of that is going to turn out. Jackie Olson, who is the executive director for WASBO, was going to be talking to Jared Nunn, who's the person at the state who does the state school fund,
Okay.
to see when we might get that rebalancing for this year. By March 1st, they have to have out the estimate for next fiscal year. So we should have that information. And that again, it's basically based on where we think we're going to end this year. So they'll be using, yeah, they'll definitely be using the ADM, the extended ADMR and extended ADMW, which will be what we will have turned in, hopefully, for the January numbers. But I know it's a lot that there as of a week, no, as of 2 weeks ago, there were still 47 school districts that didn't have their estimate of membership and revenue in for the 25-26 school year. So it makes it really difficult for them to get that information out if they don't have everybody, if everyone hasn't turned in the information yet. So I guess the long and the short of it is we should have some information from the state by March 1st, but I'm not sure that we'll have more current information on this year, but we should have something for next year for sure.
So in the last couple of years, the state has done it in this order. We would receive the 25-26 estimate by March 15th, it usually comes around the first week, second week of March, somewhere in there, as soon as they can get it done. In a meeting I was in this past week, there was, they didn't expect to have the legislative co-chairs revenue estimate at that point, so they would base it on the governor's initial proposed budget. And then after they do that, then they tend to do an update on the current year for 24, 25. And then after that, then they do the reconciliation because they need all the audits finished in the state for last year, 23, 24. So we are expecting 3 sets of estimates that will impact two of them will impact our payments, state school fund payments in May. And the third one will impact what happens in the coming year. Now, the third one in the coming year, of course, the legislature probably won't finish their work. Typically, they don't until after the May economic forecast comes out in like the third week of May. So we will long have our budget process, our proposed budget will be out. Probably being in the budget committee being asked to approve a budget even before the legislature's done. So it's always that way. We just adjust as they finalize in the end.
And that makes sense. I think I was just getting back to the fact that it sounds like Galen already made an adjustment. She sent in a request, right? So, but that was not presented tonight. And I think that's what Mark was saying. He was expecting that, right? And so, and instead of just talking numbers, it'd be nice to maybe look, get another spreadsheet that I know Galen does a wonderful job, like a new column, and this is what it was 3 months ago, last month, this month, whatever. And like maybe that would just be a topic item to talk about next month. And that could be a little bit precursor filler before Derek gets here and we talk about this committee report. And I guess I'm kind of spitballing what the agenda may look like next month as well with this discussion. So,
Well, if we're starting at 7, I don't anticipate.
well, no, but I'm saying we could still start at 6 or even 6:30, like cut that time in half, but then still do some number crunching thoughts, whatever, and then come back to do a final, committee report and still be done by 8. So,
Fine. That works for me.
okay. Besides those numbers, was there anything else? I mean, again, we still had I know PERS bonds was a discussion item at one point for future items, future meeting discussion points. Long range facility plan, budget blocks. I know these are maybe just high level spitballing we had at one point, but this is a list I have. Did you, Claire, had any ideas? No, you probably haven't looked forward in your magic crystal ball, but did you have any other additional ideas to maybe bring up for next meeting?
Well, right now I think we're shifting to the budget committee.
Yeah.
Coming into play. So I think we should take a back seat.
Okay.
To let the budget committee do their work. And then really we're asked by the board chair to meet this year. We need to see if our board chair next year will want this advisory committee
Yep.
in place again with, of
Yep.
course, conferring with the superintendent and the finance director, if it's helpful. And so we don't make that decision. So I'm just saying
Yep.
we should have the March meeting for sure,
Yep.
especially to have some kind of communication that we would give to the board and the community.
Okay.
And at that point, let the budget committee do I think is what we need to do their work. Because they will be asking the same questions about the ADMW and such. So we don't need to duplicate that process.
Sure.
That's just my thinking, but I could be convinced otherwise. If we need something at the end of the year, we can do that too. It's just there's already going to be a lot for staff to do just the budget committee work. So just don't want to have 2 strands of work in doing the same work. It doesn't make sense.
I'm just thinking here. Saul, do you have any ideas or thoughts on this?
I mean, I think what Claire's saying makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So then, as a consensus agreement, then next meeting, just focus on this financial committee report that we want to draft and submit to the board and Dave to help communicate why the board, why we were even put together here, right? So one of the main focuses.
It might not hurt, since we have our next meeting on Tuesday as well, that, I don't know, we bring up a discussion about this to see if there's anything specific that they would like to task this committee with before we get into the budget season.
I think we also need to go back to the original
Yeah.
document we received from the board. We should be
Yeah.
reviewing, and I don't have that with me. So, yeah.
Okay, well, let's just do this. Let's just pencil in the 5th again. I agree with board member Saul, and I think we should bring up just an agenda item within the board, ask if there's anything else to bring in, and then based on that discussion, we can have it we can have a later start time. We can have condense it down to maybe 7 o'clock start time or whatever. And we can discuss that via email. So does that work? At least block out the 5th for a meeting. Does that work?
And are we starting 6:37?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So we have.
We'll do that later.
Well, yeah, we'll do that via email. Just
Okay.
because me and Saul have a board meeting next Tuesday, and so we want to have a chance to bring up kind of an update from this committee to the board, where we're at, and then ask if there's anything else before the budget committee gets going. If there's anything else that we should be tasked with.
Okay, got it.
And this we is us, not another royal we. So okay, so 5th, and then we'll discuss the timing and any agenda items via email after next Tuesday. Before we close, any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
I have one other question. And if this is an offline discussion, that's fine. Noting that the audit findings were from the 2023 fiscal year, were the auditors asked why they missed those things?
They were not asked, but I think it's a valid question that I don't know if Galen or might have any thoughts on.
Well, we brought it up with they had basically the same team, but there was a little movement on their team. I don't really know why they missed some of the pieces the 2 pieces that they did. But I think it's a very valid question to ask, though.
Okay.
I think, yeah, I think we brought them in as our audit firm for 22-23, correct? So they were a brand new auditor for Newburgh School District during that time. And I don't know that this impacted that per se, but didn't we not receive payment as a result of not having our findings? Or we had delayed payment as a result of that?
It was because the audit wasn't done timely, was why you would not get state school fund.
And I don't know how, I've never been part of the process, so I don't know, could it also be kind of what you get presented is what you're working with, right? And so if we present something that we feel matches, and this is the old finance officer, but and at that point they kind of agree and they say, okay, that kind of, that makes sense. Or, are they truly getting into the weeds and say, no, you made a mistake here. And, so, and again, I don't know how that works. And so to me, it's not sure
I'm
how finite they
surprised-
get to.
I'm surprised they didn't catch the debt service payment not being posted
Okay.
correctly. That's one that is hard for me to explain. And I had the same thought as that you were just bringing forward as they're talking about. I'm thinking, how could they miss that? Because there's only several debts and they're all very large, which they would be examining. So somebody Somebody missed it, that's all. We are human.
Yes. And what really brought it to our attention was why in the world do we have this large balance in our debt service account? Because it shouldn't be big, right? It should be at year end, we've made our payments, we've collected our taxes to cover the payments, and it should be, you know, basically the leftovers, right? The pieces that we, you know, we got a little bit more tax than we thought we might have given our rate of collections, but we shouldn't have had a huge balance like we had. So that was the first thing that both Andrea and I went, what is going on here? So.
Good to know. And great question. Yeah. Okay. Any other last minute items, thoughts? Okay. Well, Galen, thank you for joining. We will call this meeting to an end as of 7:45 p.m. Thank you, everybody.